and playing this game. It's a hard game. It's a difficult game. I'll be quite honest with you. These games are never easy because you're playing a style of football that goes contrary to what you've been teaching for the past 4 months. So it's a challenge to the coaches and the players to prepare themselves, and you're preparing against great competitors. And they know their strengths and they know their weaknesses, the Naval Academy, and so they play to that. Defensively, they're playing really well lately, not giving up points, keeping the ball in front, playing a style of defense that complements their offense. I think they're 5th in the country in time of possession, so we're back to limiting your possessions, which requires you to be so efficient on offense. I think I probably have done this thing. This is my 11th time, so you can go back to your old notes and maybe get a lot of the same quotes, but it doesn't really change. It's about being efficient on offense and, getting off the field defensively. You're fighting for every blade of grass out there, and like I said, I think, Ken Niumatalolo has done a great job in a year that has not been easy for them in many ways, but they're playing really good football against the better teams, in particular Cincinnati. You had a one-score game, good win against UCF, SMU, Houston, really good competitive game. So we know that their style of offense, defense, and special teams, because believe me, I've heard from Polian 4 times today about how crazy they are on special teams, and he needs more time this week for preparation. So, what they do in special teams makes it even more difficult from a preparation standpoint. But, again, going back to the game itself, just getting our guys prepared to play them is a great challenge. And then, offensively, they've had, look, they've got some new players, some guys have moved around on the offensive line. They lost 3 really good players on the offensive line, but they still execute at a high level. And it's a difficult offense to defend against. Defensively, they returned 9 starters. And as I mentioned, playing really good football. Warren's solid and explosive on the defensive line, and Diego Fago is he's probably top 5 linebackers that we've played against, and that's the honest truth. He's explosive, very good athlete. He's their leading tackler. Really, really good football player. Can play for anybody in Power 5. And then the back end of the defense, they've made some adjustments because, Brennan's been out for the last few weeks, but with him back in, we expect him to be back in. They get more versatility in the back end of their defense. So the nuts and bolts of this, the triple option is a challenge. They hold on to the football. They've been efficient enough to score points and timely enough in their defensive stops to really force these games into one-possession games against some really good competition. So great challenge for our football team to shift gears, especially over the last 2 weeks going against offenses like, the spread at USC and North Carolina, to now have the need to be so disciplined and efficient both on offense and defense. So with that, we'll open it up to questions.
Pete Byrne, go ahead.
Hi, Brian, in the back here. In light of needing to be efficient against this team, how do you feel about your offense's efficiency the way they've played the last 2.5 games?
Yeah, so, I think efficiency also is about, being smart in how we play the game in terms of play calling, time that we call particular plays. So efficiency is both coaching and playing. So I think we have to be really good at both. Timely. You don't want to put yourself behind the chains. You want to make sure that you're putting yourself in good position, but you don't want 5 or 6 minute drives either, because that shortens the game, and that kind of plays into their hands as well. So that efficiency is on both sides. We have to coach efficiently and we have to play efficiently.
Certainly the the revival of the run game the last couple of weeks will help you do that. What are you seeing all the way through the board that's allowed you guys to run the ball the way you have the last couple of weeks?
Well, I can point specifically to the receiver perimeter blocking was the best it has been all year. It was physical. It was what we needed it to be. I think it started there. And then I just think there's been a more consistent understanding of what we're trying to accomplish offensively, and just much more of an identity. That identity, and then settling into, the roles of those guys that are up front. So that's the second piece. And then the third piece is the running back. Kyron's playing really well. I mean, maybe he was trying to do a little bit too much earlier in the year, but he's really settled in nicely, seeing things really well, and then making things happen, right? The big 90-plus yard run was indicative of a guy just, refusing to go down. So I think all three of those things factor in largely to that.
Brian, first of all, just bring us up to date on some of the injuries with Lindsay, with Hamilton, and Foskey.
Yeah, so, Braden was very optimistic, and our doctors, when I met with them yesterday, were optimistic that today we weight train, and that's kind of the next step after you're cleared from the cognitive testing. Then you go into a cardiovascular testing. So he's cleared to do that today. If he comes out of the cardiovascular testing today, he'll practice tomorrow. So we're on track, moving in the right direction with him, and he's voiced his absolute want and desire to be on the field. So we'll see how that plays out.
Okay, and how about Hamilton's situation right now?
Yeah, so he'll have, he'll be having a second treatment today on his knee, and then, he's made really good progress. We expect that progress to continue through this week, and then he'll be evaluated next week as to whether he is in a position to return for the Virginia game.
So he's out for this game then?
Yes, he'll be out.
And then Foskey said he dinged up his shoulder or something like that?
Yeah, it turned out well. I think, again, some of the bumps and bruises of a, high-impact game, but nothing that would limit him from any of our competitive stuff this week.
In preparing for Navy, I know that you talked some during the springtime that you actually prepare for Navy during the spring and pretty much all year round and trying to figure out things. What do you specifically do, and what players who are on the roster, maybe walk-ons who have specific responsibilities this week for imitating what you can to give you a good look for the game?
Yeah, Chase Ketterer is our quarterback, and there's a group of 5 guys that have been working together since the summer, and working, Asaph is a fullback for us. So, we're working midline, triple, and, that exchange so we can, get that down with some speed. The whole thing here is to try to get the initial mesh exchange done with speed. Because the ball, if you use a Nerf ball and you just have it in your hands, you don't get the right mesh reads. So those guys have been at it since the summer, and we practiced it during camp. We did a little bit during the season, and now we'll be full go starting tomorrow.
Eric Hanson is next.
Brian, without giving away trade secrets, you had a pretty good scheme with Clark Lee against the option, maybe the best of the whole time you've been here. And then Marcus, after his first stab at it, really had it under control at Cincinnati. Do you pick and choose from each of those schemes? Do you try to learn from each of those schemes and maybe come up with something special or different this week?
Yeah, so we have 2 of those people on board, right? So Mike Elston's been through 10 of these, and certainly, Marcus had what he felt was a good scheme that he felt comfortable with at Cincinnati. So you can say the collaboration of that will continue to move forward with, you know, the successes of both of those you'll see implemented in what we do on Saturday.
I'm not sure if this is the right week to ask about this guy because I don't know how he would do against option, but what's Prince Colley's journey been like this fall in terms of trying to give you some help with your depth in linebacker?
Yeah. You know, and that's a great way to put it. Each player, each freshman, each young player has a journey here at Notre Dame that is unique to themselves. And his one has been one that has taken some time. It does not mean in any way that we're down on him or he hasn't lived up to expectations, all those crazy narratives that come out of why isn't he starting? He's done really well, but it's been smaller steps because there's been a transition for him. You know, this is probably, you know, certainly a week where, you know, you want somebody that has seen it before, and, you know, Drew White's seen it before. He's a guy that knows the triple really well. You know, Bo's seen it quite a bit. So we've got some experienced guys that we would lean on for the triple more so than Prince. But he's been on a journey that I think has been really positive. But, you know, throwing him out on triple option would probably not be fair to him. But he'll be ready to help us in everything else in terms of all the special teams.
My last one is about Drew White. You know, he came in that 2018 game when Drew Tranquil got hurt.
Yep.
And I guess I'd be one of the people that thought this guy's never going to play here, and he ends up not only doing well in that game and being a very good player against the triple option, he kind of parlayed that into maybe getting the coaching staff's attention and becoming a better player all around. Can you?
He got our attention when he stopped skiing.
Okay.
That's when he got my attention. Yeah, Drew has been somebody that has really picked it up. You know, I don't know if you remember a few years back, but Greer Martini was one of those guys that really had the option down, had the you know, just the sense of, you know, where the ball was going. And Drew has that. You know, he just has a really good sense. And so he got his kind of baptism, if you will, in the option when he came in for Drew. But you know, after he battled some injuries, he really dedicated himself to being physically stronger and fit. He is as fit as any player that we have. I mean, he just takes care of himself, and he's made himself to where he is today. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the combination of just having a really good sense for playing triple, and I use the Greer Martini, who just had a great sense, and then he's put himself physically in that position by the work he's put in.
Tim Priester is next.
Speaking of linebackers, I know you've tried to get backups in. You haven't exactly had games where you had the luxury of getting backups in, but how can you give us a sense as to how worn down a Drew White and a J.D. Bertrand are at this stage of the season?
Yeah, I think we're probably in that position where most are, that, you know, you want to be careful with them. You know, Drew was coming off a shoulder injury. I would be less than truthful if I said he was 100% for last weekend's game, and probably in some instances, if we could, we wouldn't have played him. But trying to keep him out of the lineup is another thing. So he battled through it. I think he feels so much better this week, even after playing, than he did last week. So the expectations are really high for him to be closer to where he has been. Yeah, JD has played a lot of snaps, but we backed him off last week, which helped us. He had 49 live snaps compared to the week before where he had 73. So we have seen, maybe what you have seen, is that we need to take some of the load off of these guys relative to the amount of snaps they've been taking.
So how do you handle their work week? You know, I mean, I know it's difficult for you guys to get live contact with your frontline players during the week.
Are you talking about overall specifically, or just
I'm talking about these two guys in particular.
Right. So they still have to run out. You still have to get max velocity. You still have to give them a workload, but you can limit the contact. They still have to see it. They still have to play fast. because they can't get over the top of a double team. They can't work downhill and do the things they need to do at that position if you're walked through. You just can't be ready. So they can play fast, but we limit their contact during this kind of situation.
I know you have plenty on your plate that you don't worry about a lot of the outside noise, but do you feel some vindication in the way that Jack Cohn has performed and your insistence on sticking with him when he wasn't performing quite as well?
I know you'll laugh when I say this, but I didn't know that I needed to be vindicated, so maybe I don't listen enough to the people that were talking about it. Jack was the guy that, and I don't mean that in any other way other than I just don't, look, how could you be the head coach at Notre Dame if you listen to all of this stuff every day? I would jump out off my roof. I mean, it's crazy. So I think more than anything else, we felt like Jack was our best option for us to win, and we just needed to continue to work with him. And so we just, every day we worked with him, and, who knew that he was that fast, right? I will tell you this, though. I mean, and I know you guys see these things, but he's a selfless player, right? I mean, he gets a chance to run the one time going down to our end zone on the left. Most quarterbacks in that situation try to extend the football. He has the sense that he wants to extend it, and he tucks it because he doesn't want to put the ball in jeopardy. He's just that kind of player. And those nuances and those things maybe don't get seen by many, but I see that stuff. And it's just a fun guy to coach.
Kyron Williams and Logan Diggs seem to be they're allowing the offensive line. What I'm thinking of is the Wake Forest offense, how their running backs allow the offensive line.
A lot more patience.
Exactly, and we're seeing that now from Kyron and Logan. Is that something that you stress, or are they doing that instinctually?
Lance has been, I think, more involved in that process than I have, or Tommy, and that's his call, because he's sitting down watching film with them on those smaller details, and so as that unfolds, he's added that into their look. Sometimes it's like, just hit it, and you'll hear this all the time. Just jam it up in there and get what you get. That's not what he's coaching them. He's asking them to be patient in those situations and wait for those linemen to continue to move, and so that's what you're seeing as that net result.
It's easier when your offensive line's getting some push too.
Yeah, and I think all of that works together, right? If they're penetrating and we've got people in the backfield, that hesitation's not very good.
John Doerr, I guess he ended up getting a couple touchbacks last week, but he has struggled in getting the ball to the end zone. I'm assuming that it's a struggle, or is that by design that you're not doing that?
No. I told you, he had a pretty significant injury that he's working back from. He had a PRP injection on the bye week that, like I said, kicked in the Virginia Tech game with a pretty significant injury, making that kick that he made, for us on the sideline even more astounding in a sense. So he's coming back from a significant injury and trying to build up the strength in his leg. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that in some of the kickoffs.
And lastly, Zeke Correll's status?
Cleared to play.
Tim O'Malley is next.
Coach the middle. Both about Navy this time. Why are they so much better than they were in early September? It's not just a quarterback change, I'm assuming, but that has to help. It's just from watching them early and watching them now, it seems like they are Navy again.
Yeah, settling on a defensive structure. So it's keeping the points down. Marshall, they gave up over 40 points, and now the points are coming down, and teams have to spend a lot of their time or capital, if you will, on the field to score points. And so it's shortening the game, right? They're possessing the football. They're getting first downs. They're using up all their fourth downs. They're using all four, and the game closes on you. And by the time you look up, it's 4 minutes to go in the half, and you've had 3 or 4 possessions. So it's the way they're playing. But I think it has started with the defense in particular, keeping the points down.
And you mentioned the balance, being smart against Navy because you can't take 5 minutes to score. How do you balance that, though? I mean, have you almost felt over 10 years when you have closer games against them, they are just backing up and hoping we don't finish this drive with a touchdown? I mean, what's the balancing act against them?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you got to pick your spots. You got, as I said, I think I was answering the question earlier, is that, you know, the efficiency and effectiveness of your offense comes from players making plays and coaches making good calls. I mean, this is a game that puts a lot of pressure on your play caller. You know, where, you know, you got to pick your spots because you do have to push the ball vertically. You've got to get it down the field. You can't. They would love for you to check it down to the back every down, come up and make that tackle, because it's going to take you a long time and you may not get it in the end zone. And then they're really good in the red zone. They have a good scheme. They do a lot of really good things down in the red zone and make it difficult for you to score touchdowns.
Finally, for me, have you ever not seen something different from Navy when they show up for that game? Because they don't have a bye week this time, but they don't often have a bye before you actually.
No, they're going to, I mean, there's going to be a double pass, and there's going to be something that we haven't seen before, a formation, you know, and we keep the book on them. I mean, when I say the book, I mean, we've got everything from 2000, you know, and 11, you know, 10 when we played him at first. So we try to research all this stuff, and then there'll always be something different.
Patrick Engel is next.
Brian, to follow up on Jack, and then something you kind of touched on Saturday, when you look at kind of what you guys were on offense against Florida State to now and everything in between, what have you learned about him? Not so much skill set wise, but just his ability to navigate all the, I guess, the trial and error and handle that.
Well, I think I would start with coachability. You know, none of this happens unless it's with the student athlete, right? It's the player that has to be able to make some significant changes in some of the things that he had been doing and had been fairly successful for him, right? He was a successful Big Ten quarterback who had, you know, a lot of wins. And so I think that that's probably where I would start, extremely coachable. And then he's got, you know, he's got a skill set to work with. So then after we had that ability to make some changes and he was all on board, it was then finding what he really brought to the table and accentuating that skill set.
And then I don't mean to want you to give away state secrets here, but when you look at the run game the last 2 weeks, how much of that has been kind of one play or an offshoot of one play? I think you called it duo on Saturday. Or has it been kind of one you've just gone to and blocked well, or still kind of a variety of things?
It's been a variety of things. Our counterplay, our misdirection counterplay was outstanding in terms of its efficiency. But, you know, I think providing a number of different options. I'll give you an example. The touchdown pass that Tyler threw, you know, that was a run play. But they left the number 3 receiver uncovered, and so the ball got out on the perimeter. So having that versatility and having other options off of the run game, if you start to try to add too many people to it, has helped the run game as well.
Pete Sampson is next.
You know, we asked you a bunch about Lorenzo Styles and sort of his physical ability. I was interested about his upbringing. Dad played at Ohio State, played in the pros, like how much that has sort of influenced what kind of player he is on game days, but also what kind of practice player he is.
I think it's a very good question. I can't answer specifically about his dad and his work ethic, but obviously he was an outstanding player, so you would think that, and he's got a brother who's an outstanding player as well. But I can tell you that, and I've been in the home, that it is unmistakable that Mrs. Styles is driving a lot of this on a day-to-day basis. She is an incredible mother and a strong figure in that family that has, in my eyes, has created such a discipline in how Lorenzo acts on a day-to-day basis. So when he comes to practice, he's prepared, he's ready, he's disciplined. He does that in the classroom, and he brings that to the football field. So a lot of that is the parents and what they do in the home, and that is reflected in the way he's developed. So I think his parents have definitely influenced him a lot.
When Jack came back in the game at Virginia Tech, I mean, it's such sort of a line of demarcation of like what the offense has become. If Tyler Buckner doesn't get hurt, does Jack come back in the game anyway?
I got to think back to that, Pete.
was a second pick. He had an ankle injury.
Yeah, I remember him rolling his ankle. Yes, Jack was coming in. There was a conversation about is Tyler good to go, and our medical staff said he is, and we said no. I think this moment's for Jack, so he was coming back in the game.
And with Kyle Hamilton, obviously he's got a lot of things to figure out. Next year there's a lot on the line for him. Do you expect him to play again this year for Notre Dame?
I do. Okay. I do. And look, it's his decision, and those aren't easy decisions. And he'll lean on his family. We have an outside source that we bring in that evaluates all of our players, that he's got a chance to listen to all that information. But Kyle will make the right decision and what's right for him. And look, we're assuming that everything goes great with his knee, right? I mean, so let's make that assumption. And then if that's the case, he'll have all the information in front of him, and we're going to support him 100%, whatever it is. And again, that's the nature of where we are today in college football. Guys got to make those kinds of decisions, but we'll support him. He's been a great teammate.
And defensively, at the end of halves, I don't know if this is just a statistical oddity, but the last 4 weeks, the opponent sort of had a drive at the end of the half to like tack on some points. Is there anything to that, or is just like that just happened in that moment?
I'll say publicly that just happened, and let's leave it at that.
Tyler James is next.
Brian, I'm curious, is there any added concern having not played Navy last year? Maybe there's a slip in the minds of the players of what it was like to play against Navy, and how does that inform the preparation of
God,
playing against Navy?
I got to add that one now? Thank you.
Hadn't thought of that one.
I didn't even write that one down today. Let me add that to the list. I think they're quite aware of the challenges that Navy presented without having to add that to the list.
How soon in the process do you ask Marcus Freeman, like, hey, what's your plan against Navy? Is that, like, in the interview process? Is that something that's that vital to being a defensive coordinator at Notre Dame? You got to know ASAP what.
If he didn't play Navy, yes, it would have been a question. But because he played and prepared against Navy, it wasn't a question. But if I hadn't had film and watched the structure of the defense and how they performed against Navy, it would certainly be a question.
What is the evolution that you've seen in Jason Adamalola throughout this season?
On the field?
You tell me.
I think the bigger evolution has been off the field. Takes care of himself. He is extremely focused on what he's doing on a day-to-day basis. I just think he has a different level of maturity in the way he approaches his work every day, and it shows itself. Now he's fitter, he's stronger, and he's more mature, and he's getting more of an opportunity. All that comes with it, but just his outlook and his focus and preparation has been so much different than last year.
Thanks.
You're Angelo DiCarlo, you're next.
Coach, when you guys were looking to bring Chase Ketterer in, was this role something you potentially envisioned based on what he did at New Prairie?
100%. 100%. I mean, we really liked his competitiveness and thought he was an outstanding athlete, but this was a conversation that we had, and when we obviously entered into this kind of agreement.
What has he done to live up to that in terms of that preparation since, as you mentioned, since
well,
summer?
He's actually done more, quite frankly. When we became shorthanded at the quarterback position, he actually handled probably 80% of the quarterback duties on scout team the last couple of weeks. He got a little bit of help from Tyler and Drew, but not a ton. So he's actually done much more, and he's done a really, really nice job.
We'll wrap up with a question from Zoom. Len Clark, go right ahead.
Brian, you talked about how physical the Navy game is, and players in the past have talked about how physically exhausting it is. Is there a point of emphasis with Matt Ballas and you and your staff in terms of an emphasis area to keep them hopefully fresh against Navy?
Yeah, I don't think you can focus on it, and all that is correct in terms of the game itself and the feedback from former players. But this is a year-round process relative to our football team, from body scan, density, and finding out where our guys are with lean body mass, to in-season training, to making sure that our football team is as strong, if not stronger, than they were when we went into camp. And that's understanding that we have to play, a team like Navy later in the season. So it's all part of, a well laid out plan by our strength and conditioning staff, and obviously our nutritionists and everybody working together to get to this end where we know we're going to have a physical game, and we've got to be at our best late in the season.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, thanks, guys.